Okay guys, it's time to review one of my favorite childhood movies and to celebrate the 40th anniversary of the theatrical release of King Kong, 1976. King Kong stars Jeff Bridges, Jessica Lange, and is directed by John Gillerman. So what's up guys, this is a review that I've been planning for a while. I enjoy doing what I call nostalgic reviews of movies from my childhood. And I believe that everybody has, maybe 3 or 4 movies that are what I would call maybe checkpoints of your childhood. Be it the first movie that you remember, a movie that is really important to your adolescence, and maybe a movie that was there for you when you were stepping into a different part of your life. Well, the first movie that I remember is King Kong from 1976. I remember sitting on my couch with my mom and my dad, and this movie, it came on basic television, maybe NBC, CBS, something like that. And I just remember being completely entertained, being scared to death, and also being really sad after watching this movie. Now keep in mind, like I said, I was maybe 4 or 5 years old at the time, but it made a lasting impression. And really, it's one of those movies I find completely interesting because of its backstory. There's very little information out there about this movie in video form. I mean, you can go on Internet Movie Database and check out trivia, and there's quite a bit of stuff in there, but most movies, they have like a documentary or something, and there's really no documentary of this movie. People don't really talk about it that much, so it's almost a forgotten movie. And I would wager that most people say that this is probably the worst of the King Kong movies, but it's always been one of my favorites for nostalgic reasons. And anyway, let's get into this movie. Now, of the 3 King Kong movies, this is the only one that is a modern day remake. It doesn't take place in the 30s, like the Peter Jackson one, or of course like the original. And they changed the story just a little bit. I mean, it's basically the same plot. But really in this one, you have this rich, greedy, selfish businessman played by Charles Grodin. All he wants is to get rich. He doesn't even know about the existence of King Kong. He wants to go to Skull Island because he thinks there is oil to be found there. And early in the movie, Jeff Bridges, who is an anthropologist, he loves animals, and he's always been interested in the mythology of Skull Island. This is something that is hundreds of years old. And that first scene when he comes onto the ship and he starts explaining, the mythology of King Kong, that scene right there really got me interested in this movie.
From thy wedding with the creature who touches heaven, Lady, God preserve thee.
And really the setup, I think, is directed very well because we don't see King Kong until 53 minutes into the movie. So there's this constant build-up, and there are a couple of elements that complement that build-up. First off is the score by John Barry. To me, out of all 3 King Kong movies, I think this is the best score for me. It's very different though. It's emotional. From the beginning of the movie, the score really sets up the tone. We know that by the time that we see King Kong, the main characters in this movie, they are in grave danger. And that score just constantly reminds you of that. And it's really cool sounding score. It's dark, it's eerie, it's depressing at times, but it's also beautiful. Now, Jessica Lange might be one of the most interesting characters in King Kong. We first see her floating up to the ship in a buoy, and there was this shipwreck. And right away, she seems really eccentric. She's from a movie background, she's an actress. And there's one scene that makes you think that she might have come from a porn background. They never really spell it out, but...
Did you ever meet anyone before whose life was saved by Deep Throat?
But you kind of get that vibe that she's from that background. Now, this is Jessica Lange's first movie, and she really does a damn good job. Especially in the finale of the movie. It takes place on the World Trade Center, which is also very interesting. But this is one of my favorite scenes in the movie. It's so emotional. I think out of all 3 King Kong movies, this one is the saddest. It's gut-wrenching. King Kong is doing everything he can to protect Dwan, and these military guys in these helicopters, they are just unloading on him, and it's really bloody. By the end of that scene, you're just crying your eyes out. It's so sad. And I have to give Miss Lange credit because she really had to react off of nothing. Outside of a mechanical arm, she really didn't have that much to act with. So to see her just completely break down and just pour out this emotion, you forget that she's not acting to anything. Now let's talk about King Kong and the creation of, the creature. Originally they wanted to create a real mechanical King Kong, and they did that. And to this date, it's one of the biggest mechanical creations ever by Carlo Rambaldi. He actually made a 40-foot mechanical structure. And the sad thing is, that creation is only in the movie for about a minute near the end when he is breaking out of the chains. That's it. The rest of the movie is actually Rick Baker in a suit. If you don't know who Rick Baker is, he is one of the biggest names you might hear in special effects, especially in Hollywood in the 70s and 80s. He created the werewolf in American Werewolf in London. Today it's really dated, but I remember as a kid, to me it was really believable. He sold it as a guy in a suit. And a lot of that is done in the camera. When you finally do see King Kong, there is this build-up. He's actually walking through the forest. They don't show him in full view. And I remember King Kong's voice. It was so signature. And it was really creepy. But the guy who actually did the voice, he was literally coughing up blood in the studio. That's how much he had to give of his voice to get a good performance. Now, this is a dark movie, but there's also a lot of comedic foreshadowing, especially before you see King Kong.
Let's not get eaten alive on this island. Bring the mosquito spray.
And one of my favorites is when Dwan says that she had a dream that she was gonna see the biggest person she's ever seen in her life.
And it said that I was gonna cross over water and meet the biggest person in my life.
Now, as far as any cons, the obvious one is, yes, this movie is really dated. So if you watch King Kong today, especially with the great CGI effects that we see today, they don't hold up that well. A perfect example is when King Kong is fighting the snake. You can tell that it's a guy in a suit fighting a mechanical snake. But I've always been a fan of all those 70s and 80s practical effects. They really don't bother me too much. And also there's one section in the movie where King Kong is, what's the best word to put it? Molesting Dwan, and that scene makes me really uncomfortable to watch today. I mean, he really is a horny ape, and his eyes are getting all big and whatnot in the scene. I usually just fast forward right past that. I don't get where they were coming from. But overall, guys, I would definitely give King Kong 1976 a purchase order. I've always had a fun time watching this movie. Even to this day, I still really enjoy it. I'm curious to see what you guys that have not seen King Kong from '76 would think about the movie if you watched it today. And also, please post in the comments the first movie that you remember watching. I'm really curious on that one. Also, make sure you jump over to Killer Flicks, become a member, where we talk horror all day, every day. If you like what I'm doing, please subscribe. And of course, you can always follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd. And Drumdum out.